Okay, so the first of the class guide, so Balanced Druid in TBC, how to play it, all talents, everything that you need to know. As you can see, little fella on screen, we're joined by Master Pat Frick, like I said his name right. He's going to be helping us inside the dojo when we start finding everything out. Obviously, make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell, get notifications. Come follow me over on Twitch, Scottejaye 87. Make sure you stick around to the end, because obviously I'll announce the giveaway and what's going on, so you don't want to miss that. This guide will serve you well for Tier 4 and Tier 5. Things change up a little bit. End of Tier 6, some will plateau, but obviously we'll get into that in a part 2. Let's get inside the dojo and learn how to play balance. Okay then, so Master Pat's gone to take a tea break. He's going to be coming back to help us with the rotation. But first of all, let's go over to the wall where our Boomkin stood waiting for us, and we're going to go over the basics. So this is all laid out in a very specific order. So we're going to look at the talents first, because they're going to dictate what abilities you've got. Then we're going to look at what abilities you're going to use regularly. We're going to look at some add-ons that I highly recommend that you use in TBC. You may already use them in Classic, but and they will come up quite a lot. In most of these class guides, I use a very similar set of add-ons for all classes that I play. We're then going to look at professions, so the 2 professions that you should absolutely have as a PvE boomkin. Then we're going to look at stat priority. Then we're going to get consumable up, so what do you need for raids? Then we're going to look at the rotation, and that's when Master Pat Frick will come back to have a look and help us with a rotation, because there's some things. It's not just spamming Starfire, as most people will say. It's a one-button rotation. Trust me, it's not. The fundamentals that you'll learn in this guide are what will set you apart from all the other boomkins. Okay, so let's just jump straight in with the talents. I will put a link to these talents in the description of the video as well, so you can just basically copy and paste it. So first of all, we'll just jump straight in with 5 points in Starlight Wrath, so reduces the cast time of your Starfire and Wrath. Obviously, Starfire is the one we're pretty interested in more than anything, if I'm honest. Then we're going to get 2 points in Focus Starlight for the 4% crit strike on Wrath and Starfire. Crit is king. Obviously, the reason crit is king is because when we get further down, we're going to get Nature's Grace, which means you're going to be casting quicker. Improves Moonfire, so damage and critical strike chance of Moonfire, which you'll be using Moonfire a lot. We then need to, you've got a choice here. I put 1 point in Nature's Grasp, just for a bit of utility, but you could put a point in Control of Nature if you wanted to. But as I say, I would go Nature's Grasp, just 1 point. Helps a little bit when you're out in the world. Then you're going to want 1 point in Insect Swarm, because you're going to be using Insect Swarm quite a lot. 2 point in Nature's Reach, which obviously just increases your range, which is lovely, because then you don't need to stand near bad stuff. I then go into Brambles, because increasing the damage of Thorns is nice to put on your tank, and there's generally only 1 Boomkin in the run, and you'll normally be the only person with Brambles, so that's nice. Then you're going to want 5 points in Vengeance, which increases the damage bonus of your Starfire by 100%, which is nice. Obviously does Moonfire and Wrath as well, but we're not too bothered about that at the moment. Celestial Focus we don't take. It's a PvP talent, but you know, if you want to do a bit of PvP on the side, you might want to tailor this spec, so you can. Then obviously Nature's Grace, definitely want that. That's the bread and butter of this spec. Luna's Guidance increases spell damage and healing by 25% of your intellect. Moonglow. Now Moonglow is one where this is quite optional, I would say, because you can, you know, we only need 1 more point, so you could put another point in Brambles or just put 1 point in Moonglow to now get down to the next tier. But early on, mana will probably be an issue, especially if you haven't got Shadow Priest in your group, which you might not have. You obviously chug in mana pots and demonic runes and things like that we're going to cover later on, but I go 3 points in Moonglow, especially early on in the tiers. 5 in Moon Fury, increasing the damage of Starfire, Moonfire and Wrath by 10%. Then Balance of Power, obviously because this is 4% less hit that you're going to need, so you're going to absolutely want that. Moonkin Form, obviously. 3 points in Dream State, again, regenerating mana equal to 10% of your intellect every 5 seconds, even while casting. And mana is an issue, especially early on. As I say, it becomes less of an issue later on, especially in 25 man. It's less of an issue because you probably will end up in a group with a Shadow Priest. Improved Fairy Fire, again, this is another one which you can take or you don't have to take. For now, we'll skip it and we'll just go 5 points in Wrath of Cenarius. So your Starfire spells gain an additional 20%, your Wrath spells an additional 10% of your bonus damage effects. I'm going to leave these 3 points. I do take Improved Fairy Fire because, you know, it's 3% less hit that your melee and range need to worry about. So range, that's not spells, by the way. That is only basically your hunters. The reason it's really good is because if you're a regular raiding boomkin and you've got quite a solid 25 man where it's generally the same people, all of the people in the group know they can lose 3% hit off their gear to gain crit or gain more primary stats or whatever they want. because you're there. So again, it makes your raid spot even more, I'm not going to say viable, because Boomkins are very viable, but it makes you more sought after by your guild, especially if you're, you know, a regular attender. So we will go free. We'll go free and improved fairy fire. Now over here, we're obviously going to take improved Mark of the Wild, because there's no need for Furor, does absolutely nothing for Boomkin. Then we're going to go free into natural shapeshifter. Again, you're probably thinking, well, I'm not going to be shapeshifting a lot, but you know, that 30% mana saved just by when you're having to come out to combat res or anything like that, you know, it's well worth taking. Then we're going to go, I go 2 into naturalist, which is entirely up to you. I like the quicker cast healing touch, but you could get the damage, you know, avoidance reduction when you're casting. That's again entirely up to you. Then 3 into intensity, and then I go 2 into subtlety. Now, this is where the whole spec revolves around, really. As in, when I say the whole spec revolves around, you could take the 3 out of the improved fairy fire and get 5 in subtlety. Or drop points out of Moonglow to go into subtlety. So if we were to take 3 out of there, you know, maybe take 2 out of there, put it in subtlety. You know, it really depends how much threat reduction you're actually going to need. That's what you're going to have to play about with yourself. You might be far more skilled than me and not need subtlety at all. You know, you might, when I say more skilled, you might just do less damage, but you know, whatever. You might be able to control your aggro better. But yeah, that's the basic talents. You know, there's not really, I don't need to give too much reasoning why we're getting those, other than maybe Force of Nature. You're like, well, it's a big talent, why have you not took that? They're wild, they're out of control, they can break CC, they're really, really weak, they just die incredibly quick. Not a very good talent. Maybe you want to put a point in there for when you're out farming. Quite good when you're out farming, don't get me wrong, but for a PvE, raid, spec, Boomkin, you don't need Force of Nature. But that's the talents. So with abilities, we'll just briefly look at what you'll use, you know, on the average boss fight. So starting with sort of the rotational ones. So you've got Insect Swarm, which obviously deals damage over time and reduces the chance to hit of that target by 2%. So very nice for your tank. There is a sting that a hunter can do, which is 5%. So it's actually better, but that reduces the hunter's overall damage. So, you know, this is 2% for free, basically, because it's part of your rotation anyway. Then we've got Moonfire. So obviously Moonfire does instant damage, as a higher crit chance than any of your other abilities due to talents. So remember that. And obviously does, yeah, a nice damage over time. And the reason it's important to remember the crit part is because directly after a Moonfire, if it procs Nature's Grace, you don't really want to be Moonfiring again until you've consumed it. But we'll get into that, into the rotation bit when old Master Pat Frick is helping you out. So then obviously you've got Starfire, which is your bread and butter spell, basically. You know, you can get away. If you have mana problems and you're dropping your dots, you can just literally spam Starfire. Now, I know I said it's not just a spam Starfire spec. That's not how I'm going to teach you how to play it. But, you know, you can do that. You can just spam Starfire and your damage will be reasonable. Then we've got Wrath. Obviously, Wrath it can have the potential. I'm not going to say it does. It can have the potential to do more damage than Starfire. But obviously, at a lot higher mana consumption. So if you're going using Starfire, you're never going to be able to use Wrath. What I use Wrath for, and what I'm going to teach you how I use it situationally, is when I know a mob's going to die within a Starfire. You might as well fire a Wrath out because, you know, you've got more chance of at least getting a bit of damage out. Or if a target needs to die super quick, then spamming Wrath can be the way to go. Then really, so they're your rotational abilities. Then you've got you utility, what you bring to the raid. So obviously you've got your combat res, which you'll use. You've got your innovate, which most likely you're going to need on yourself. But you might be asked to save it for a healer, and you have to be a bit more mana conservative. But that's fine, you know. But you've got innovate. You've also got Cyclone. Obviously, Cyclone is just another CC. You will find a use for it. You will absolutely use it. Other than that, so you have got more utility. You've got Hibernate and things like that. Again, all very situational. For your AoE, the only thing you've got is Hurricane on, you know, a minute cooldown and very, very, very high mana cost. So I tend to use Hurricane with Bark Skin. So the same way in Classic, you probably at the moment Bark Skin Tranquility. So you've still got Tranquility. You can use that as a big clutch AoE heal for your group, obviously. But again, even with Tranquility, you don't want it being interrupted, do you? You don't want to lose a tick of it when it's so expensive to cast. So you'll probably use Bark Skin in conjunction with either Tranquility or Hurricane. And when it comes to abilities, to be fair, that's about it. There are other things you'll use. You know, you'll keep Thorns on your tank and things like that, and you've got Decurse and Remove Poison, Abolish Poison, all those sorts of things. But on an average boss fight, the abilities that I've just sort of covered will get you through more or less any fight. And that's good, because that gives you a bit of an idea of what you need to be tracking on your bars, which you'll see when we get into the next section, which is going to be the UI add-ons sort of side of things, where we're just going to jump in game and have a look at how my Boomkin looks on a TBC server. And that leads us nicely in game. So now we can have a look at the UI. So this is how I have my Boomkin set up. So fairly minimalistic. I use grid, or you can use some sort of raid frames, whatever works for you. I use grid personally. I'll be using grid in classic TBC when it launches, as well as private servers, obviously. Then I have these. So this is Bartender. So if I just open Bartender to show you. So I basically have most of my bars hidden, because I know what all my binds are. You know, the more comfortable you get with your class, the less you actually need to see things. So I get a lot of people ask me on the stream, you know, is that all I need? You know, the buttons that I can physically see, is that all I need? So if we run through why that's all I need. So all I've got there is things that have got a cooldown, as in I need to know the cooldown of Rebirth, Hurricane, Tranquility, Innovate, Bark Skin, Dash. I like to know when Dash is there, just in case I need to run out of stuff, obviously. And then again, people ask, well, why have you got Starfire there? I use Starfire, that button there, literally just as a range check, nothing else. So if I can actually find something to kill, I'll show you. So if I wanted to attack that mob over there, you can see that it's red, so I know that I'm out of range of it. Obviously, when it then becomes the right colour, I know I'm in range. So when I'm in combat, I need to track a certain amount of things, which you're going to find out more when we get to the rotation. But obviously I need to track Insect Swarm, Moonfire and Fairy Fire, for example. So if I Fairy Fire this mob up, you can see down here, shows a timer. So I know that now the ranged and the melee are getting their 3% hit for the next 33 seconds. When I put my dots up, they also have timers. So they're really the three things that I need to maintain on the boss at all times. The one that you saw pop up then was a trinket proc, which again, when we get into the nitty gritty of the rotation, you're going to see why that becomes more and more important. Trinkets are not something you want to ignore, and you need to track them in some way, shape or form, whether it's weak auras. This is power auras, but I will be using weak auras on classic TBC like I do on classic on my Druid at the moment. So I'm tracking two trinkets with power auras. So Quag's Eye, which gives me a haste buff, and Shifar's Nexus Horn, which gives me obviously spell damage buff. So I want to know when they proc, because I don't want to be wasting trinket procs on casting dots, because you know, by the time you cast one, then you've got a global cooldown. It's a waste of time. I want to know as soon as those trinkets proc, so I can then instantly start going in for the big starfires. So it's obviously Sod's Law that I'm not going to actually get any procs when I'm trying to show you. Sorry, the last one that I track as well is obviously Nature's Grace, because again, I want to know when I'm going to have that half a second cast time off of my next starfire, because I don't want to waste it. Because if I Moonfire now and crit, it didn't crit. But if I was to have Moonfired and it crit, then it's just going to refresh Nature's Grace, and I never actually use the initial charge. And the same goes with the trinkets. When I get Quagmiran's Eye proc, it's a haste buff. So I don't want to be wasting that haste buff on casting a Moonfire and Insect Swarm. I want to make sure that I use as many of those haste procs as I've got on casting those big starfires. So that's the main thing around the UI. I don't feel for a Boomkin, obviously other than your obvious ones like DBM or Bigwigs, at whatever way you want to track boss abilities, you know, and boss encounters. But I think Bartender, just for a clean UI, power auras or weak auras to be able to track all of your cooldowns and your abilities. Outside of that, you know, it's entirely up to you. I feel as a Boomkin, you can absolutely more or less just raid with two add-ons, DBM and... Actually, let's make that three add-ons. DBM, power auras / weak auras, and Omen, or some description of a threat meter. Because like I said at the start, you are a bit of a threat machine as a Boomkin, depending on how many points you put in subtlety. So you definitely want to be watching your threat versus the tank. Well, versus the entire raid, to be completely honest. But that's it. If anyone wants my weak aura strings, you can join my Discord server and I'll post them in Discord for you. So next we're going to briefly look at professions, the two professions that I would recommend you take. and stat priorities, and then we can start getting into the fun stuff. There you go, you can see my second trinket proc there, which is 225 spell damage. So obviously I want to get as many Starfires out, well, and the other one procs as well, that's lovely. I want to get as many casts of Starfire out with those procs up as possible. So yeah, let's start looking at professions. So with professions, I'll put a link up the top now so you can go and have a look and then come back to this later maybe. I've done really in-depth sort of dives into all of the professions in TBC, as well as a wrap-up at the end on basically as each class, what profession should you be. So as a Druid, the absolute min-max best professions for PvE that you can get is tailoring leatherworking. So tailoring makes these sort of things that I'll put on now for you. So Spellfire, the Spellfire set, really, really nice. Lots and lots of arcane damage. It lacks a little bit in terms of, because you are keeping Insect Swarm up, occasionally you do Wrath, you're not getting any damage bonus there. But for pure single target, Starfiring, keeping Moonfire up, the damage is really, really nice, And then leatherworking is obviously for drums. So really briefly, if you don't know, if you've got 4 out of 5 in a party with drums, it's a permanent 5% haste buff. So 20 out of 25 in a raid, the entire raid is getting 5% haste. So it's like a mini permanent heroism or bloodlust. So everybody's going to want this. And your chance of getting in a raid, I'm not saying you're not going to get to raid if you don't go leatherworking, but I would say if there's a boomkin with leatherworking and equivalent gear to a boomkin without leatherworking, I'd take the one with leatherworking. It's a no-brainer. So as a raid leader, it would be a no-brainer. So tailoring, obviously, to make the really, really sick items initially. You'll replace them in tier 5. Could last you to tier 6, but tier 5 you'll start replacing some of them. There is also a level working set you can make. It's not as good as the tailoring set, but you might want to make the feral set, for example. So you might want to make the feral off-spec set or something, so that you can still make use of level working outside of drums with tailoring. Now, if you didn't want to go tailoring, because I know a lot of boomkins won't want to go tailoring because it's got a lot of damage, but it does lack on other stats. Obviously it's just loads of intellect, but you're losing out on stamina, potentially mana per 5, spirit, or, I understand. And me personally, if I wasn't going tailoring, I'd go enchanting. And my boomkin that we was just looking at is actually level working enchanting. You get the spell power on your rings, which is very, very nice. There's no other way to get those ring enchants without being enchanting. But tailoring, ultimately, if you're min-maxing, is the way to go. Okay, so we're nearly at a rotation. Just one last hurdle to get over, so consumables. So in TBC, consumables they're still there, obviously, but the whole world buffs and all of that sort of thing, that's gone. So it's not all quite as painful, and flasks are a lot cheaper, easier to come by. It's whereas in Classic, using a flask is a novelty. In TBC, it's just an expectation. So you're going to want Flask of Blinding Light, which is the highest arcane spell damage flask you can get. There is an overall spell damage flask, for all schools of magic, but it's less. We just want lots of arcane damage. Potion-wise, so destruction potions and haste potions are very nice, but realistically, as a boomkin, you're going to just be chugging mana potions, super mana potions more than likely, and more than likely on cooldown as well. So it's good to carry like sort of destruction pots or haste pots ready for if it's a fight where, it's not going to last very long, you're not going to go home, so, you can just push out as much damage as physically possible. But if there is any sort of threat on your mana bar, then you'll just be chugging super mana pots. Another way to keep your mana up, obviously, is to use demonic runes as well. Exactly the same as in Classic, they come from the same places. So demonic runes or dark runes, obviously absolutely same as Classic. There's no new version. You'll still be getting the same ones, but everyone raiding, especially boomkins, because of your mana issues, you should be using these. And then for food, it's basically just Blackened Basilisk, which is 23 spell damage, or Crunchy Serpent, which is also 23 spell damage. Both give 20 spirit as well. Obviously, I class drums as a consumable, so you should always have drums with you. And then for your weapon, obviously you want Superior Wizard Oil, which gives 42 spell damage. Or you can actually use Brilliant Wizard Oil if you want the crit as well. So slightly less spell damage, but also getting some crit. And that's it for consumables. So we can actually now move on to the fun stuff, which is how do you do some damage? You thought I forgot stat priorities, didn't you? But just while Master Pat Frick and our Boom King get ready, getting the target doles out and everything. Just really quickly. So obviously spell hits your top priority. That's what you want. So you need 16% overall. You get 4% from balance of power anyway. So now you only need 12%. So that's a total of 152 hit rating. Obviously, you need less than that because if you've got an elemental shaman in the group, they give you a totem with 3% hit and 3% crit. Also, if you're alliance and you've got a Draenei, that's another 1%. So potentially, if you're an alliance boomy, you might only need 8% hit. But you want your hit cap, you then want spell power and haste, then spell crit, then everything else. I say haste, but remember, you're not going to get haste really until tier 6 onwards. So you're really going to just be going hit, spell power, crit. As long as you go for those 3 in tier 4 and 5, you'll be absolutely spot on. I think they're ready for us. Okay, so what we're going to start off with is single target first, obviously. So we're stood in front of one. We're going to get a target dummy out. Well, we've got a target dummy out. We're going to literally just focus on single target. It's not difficult, but I want to just go over some of the more intricate things that you want to be looking out for, which I've already mentioned. So obviously you want 100% uptime on Fairy Fire, Insect Swarm next, then Moonfire, and then spam Starfire, obviously. If it's a target that's going to die quite quickly, and you know mana's not an issue, so you know maybe you're going to get time to drink or whatever, you can use Wrath instead of Starfire, but ultimately you want to be doing Starfires. It's nice to see those big crits anyway. Now, if it's a long fight, and I'm talking a fight where using your mana potions on cooldown, using your demonic runes or dark runes on cooldown, and maybe even you've used your own innovate, you know, if that's not enough and you're still going because you haven't got a Shadow Priest in your group before the boss dies, so let's say you've wiped on Illhoof's a good example. Illhoof's quite a long fight, in Karazhan, by the way, that is. So if you're going before the boss dies, you might want to drop your dots out completely and just spam Starfire. You'll read or hear in other guides that you should only use dots when moving, but dots make up about 40% of your overall damage. Now, if you can maintain your dots, you should absolutely maintain your dots because it's what they bring as well. So when you Moonfire, you have a higher chance than obviously when you're Starfiring or Wrathing even to proc Nature's Grace. So now you're getting half a second off your next Starfire. So what you need to be looking out for on single target, the big things, the only times you should let your dots drop is if you can't maintain them anymore due to mana, you have a trinket proc, which you're using power auras or weak auras or whatever to track, because your trinket procs are more valuable to your Starfires, particularly Quagmiran's Eye, which I showed you earlier on when we was looking in game. So Quagmiran's Eye gives you 320 haste rating, you know, that quicker Starfires back to back, potentially with if one of them crits, and then you're getting Nature's Grace on top of that as well. So it's fine, let your dots drop off. You shouldn't refresh dots during trinket procs at all. I don't even use dots during Bloodlust. Or Heroism if you're Alliance. So if Bloodlust is up, spam Starfire. Just don't stop spamming Starfire because you're going to get more value out of it in the long run. So, as I say, just quick recap. Single target, Fairy Fire, up 100% of the time. Insect Swarm, Moonfire, and then spam Starfire. Stop with your dots. If you get a Trinket proc, then just focus on Starfire. If there's Bloodlust or Heroism up, just use Starfire. But you need to be monitoring those Trinket procs. As I say, that is going to be the difference between you and another Boomkin. If they're just ignoring their trinkets and just doing a set rotation, not worrying about them, you'll be seeing those big sort of 5-6k crit Starfires more often because you're getting more opportunity because you're watching your Trinket procs. Now let's say there's 2 targets. So only 2. You want to multi-dot both. So you want to keep Moonfire and Insect Swarm up 100% of the time on both mobs, assuming that your mana can maintain that. But you want to be watching for Nature's Grace procs because now you're multi-dotting 2 mobs. Your Nature's Grace chance of proccing is obviously quite high because you're using Moonfire twice as often. So if you Moonfire and say you Insect Swarm, you open with Insect Swarm and then Moonfire the first mob, you get a Nature's Grace, use a Starfire before you put your next dots up. So Starfire that mob or Starfire the other mob, doesn't really matter. Then go Insect Swarm, Moonfire on the next one. If that then procs, obviously Starfire. If it don't and your other dots are about to fall off or anything like that, obviously refresh them, but then just keeping as close to 100% uptime on both mobs with both dots, but at the same time always consuming a Nature's Grace without overwriting it. Because remember, if you Moonfire 2 mobs in a row, you're only going to get, they could both potentially crit, and you're only going to get one use of Nature's Grace for your Starfire. So it's worth holding off a few seconds on those dots on the second mob to consume that Nature's Grace on a Starfire. Same applies. If you get a Trinket proc, don't keep multi-dotting. Just let the dots run their course, whatever, even if it's only on one, and you consume all of the seconds that you've got from your Trinket proc on your Starfire. And then for more than 2 mobs, so 3, 4, 5, whatever, on 3, just same applies as 2. Just keep your dots up, consume Nature's Grace as often as you can, and obviously watch for your Trinket procs. 4 plus, if they're stood together, feel free to use a Hurricane, maybe Bark Skin, just in case you pull aggro and it ends up, you don't want to lose any ticks of that Hurricane. Otherwise, I tend to just literally Insect Swarm everything first, then Moonfire. If I get a proc, Starfire. If I don't get a proc, next Moonfire, and just rinse and repeat. So again, the difference between 2 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets, nothing changes really, other than at 4 plus I would be using Hurricane. Before that I wouldn't, I would just be multi-dotting, but always consume your Nature's Grace procs on a Starfire. And that's it. You're now a professional Boomkin. You need to track your trinkets to be a good Boomkin. Mana is extremely important, obviously. Make sure you're using your mana potions on cooldown. Make sure you're coming prepared, because if you forget mana pots for one raid, your damage is going to suffer massively, like massively, because in tier 4, particularly Karazhan, if you've got no Shadow Priest with you, you are going to have problems. But they're not problems that you can't overcome by coming prepared. So good luck. I hope you found this useful. If you did, make sure you like, subscribe, check me out over on Twitch, all that stuff. And I did mention the giveaway. I'll put it on screen now. So this is the overall channel giveaway. It's still running, but I've also said in the Profession videos, well, the Profession wrap-up video, I believe it was, if we hit 5k subscribers before Christmas, I'm going to do an extra £100 Amazon voucher giveaway just to say thank you for getting to 5k subscribers before Christmas. Can we do it? I don't know. It's down to you guys. But until the next one, which is going to be Feral DPS, peace out.